Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. Erin Summers here alongside John DeShazier. JD, I hope you got a little bit of a break over the bye week.
I don't think anybody got a break over the bye week. There is no such thing as a break when both of these teams are going at the same time. Now, we didn't have to come to football practice, which was great, but, you know, when you have other things to do that you push to the side the entire season, when you had 11 consecutive games, which means 11 consecutive weeks, you play a lot of catch-up, and you try to take a deep breath, but it's pretty much impossible. So I think we're all in the same boat.
How much did you have to do around the house for your wife?
Let's see. There is now a rock garden instead of a plant garden, and so that required, if I'm not mistaken, 120 bags of red lava rocks.
Wow.
And so they get heavy after a while. They're small bags, but you do a lot of transporting, and if you're doing it yourself, you got to pull all the plants out, and you got to put all the stuff down. Love you, honey. And you got to put the mesh down. We did it ourselves. And wait, so I'm going to throw my wife under the bus here. She is now allergic to going outside, basically. She can't go outside without just, her allergies just kicking up awful. So she can't really do any work outside.
Did it happen just before this project?
No. I will give her this. It has happened. It happened a while ago, and it was just one of those things. And so she got tested, and the doctor tells her basically, you're allergic to going outside. So now she can kind of go outside to supervise, but she can't really go outside to work. So that means, the rock garden that we were going to do, or that she was going to do, I did. So it was a little bit of work. But, hey, the final product, if she's happy, I'm cool, because I could not care less about that kind of thing. Because I will cut the grass and I'll do the edging and the trimming. We're talking about everything but the Saints, right? But I'll do that kind of thing. But beautifying and all that is not my thing. I like that it looks good, but I could not care less about how it looks good or anything like that. I do appreciate this. No longer having to pull weeds out of the garden. So that part, hey, we can rock with that. So, yeah, all in all, good result, and now we got a whole bunch of people coming to town, and we got to entertain Thanksgiving Day, and that's a whole different story for a whole nother day.
Well, I don't know, because it's one of your favorite things to do is to talk to football players about non-football things. They got a lot of the Thanksgiving questions today.
Well, see, that's just keep the main thing. That's. And I was not around for a lot of that. Now I did. I have to admit, I lobbed a grenade over there just for the heck of it.
You did, and I was shocked because usually you don't like to participate.
Well, I can't stand those, but I just lobbed one over there just for the heck of it. I couldn't resist because I was not actually participating in the interview, so I just wanted to see if I could wreck it for another 30, 40 seconds. And of course, the bait was taken, and it was Cam Jordan.
So naturally,
Cam, Cam's always going to take the bait, and if Cam didn't take the bait, one of the other media people who enjoy that kind of thing would have. So. Yeah. I knew somebody was going to start up with the whole Thanksgiving thing, and it was like, we got tomorrow for that, right? Because tomorrow is Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. Don't empty your don't fire all your bullets today. Wait till tomorrow and get all that stuff out of the way, and even then, let's not go overboard with it, because I just. How do I say this? I don't care what people like for their sides.
I was just about to ask, is that something that Saints fans are craving to know?
No. No. Well, now I shouldn't speak for the populace, because I don't know. I don't know if they.
It's at John DeShazier on X.
They just like Saints, and they like content, and so they like what the Saints are talking about. But me personally, and yes, you can email me, or you can tweet me or X me or whatever you want to call it. No, I don't care. I do not care that a guy likes what kind of dressing, or in fact, me and Willie Gay were debating, because Willie Gay likes the white gravy, and I was like, I'm a brown gravy dude, and so I heard him tell somebody he liked talking about white gravy, and I walked over to his locker, and I was like, well, you're from Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, and I was like, they don't make white gravy in Mississippi, they make brown gravy, and he was like, yeah, my grandma does, and it's great, and I'm like, well, why are you talking about white gravy then? So we went, over that.
Yeah.
So I actually did get wrapped up a little bit, but it was like a side shot, and it wasn't something I initiated. But when I hear a dude talk about white gravy, I mean that's just scandalous to be talking about white gravy instead of brown gravy, and that's as far as I'll go with this Thanksgiving stuff. I'm done with that.
Well, we are thankful that we're going to have Thursday off for Thanksgiving because Rizzy decided to change the schedule to Tuesday, Wednesday.
God bless that man.
Off on Thursday, practice Friday. So that's why we're in here a day early, talking Saints. Finally, we are getting to it. They were back on the field for the first time after their bye week, and week 13, getting ready for the Rams. Seemed like the energy is still extremely high, and they're you never know that there might be a lull after those 2 wins. You get a break, and then you come back, and it seems like they picked up right where they left off.
Yeah, the shine isn't off yet. They've won 2 straight games. You really, you kind of betwixt in between on whether you actually want to go on the bye because you got a little momentum, but you want to go on the bye because there are bodies that are beat up because you played 11 straight weeks.
Yeah.
So they needed some recuperation. And I'm sure getting back on the practice field today, I'm sure that everybody had a little bit of bounce in their step because, you've had a good week to get off your feet, to kind of exhale, to kind of do some other things. And now you recollect yourself and recommit. And, now there is a real sprint down the stretch.
Rizzy said that he spent the bye week spending a lot of time with family, traveling around to different places, but also going back over a lot of game film. And there were 3 specific things that he brought up for each area of the game. Defensively, it was eliminating those explosives and tackling, which is something we've been talking about. Offensively, it was second half execution, finishing games. And then special teams, he mentioned the kickoff return needs to be more consistent. In your assessment, you agree with all those areas, and those would provide big changes?
Yeah, I can't argue with him. Defensively, the explosives have been a thorn all season. The explosives go back to the Philadelphia game and Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert getting 60-plus yard plays. Saquon runs it for a touchdown, and Goedert sets them up for the game-winning touchdown. So that goes all the way back to that, and I think that was week 3. And now, if you're talking about offense, what they're doing offensively probably isn't sustainable. They have a fast start, and it's not sustainable to not be able to execute or score in the second half. You're going to have a time where you're going to have to execute. You're going to have to be able to maintain the ball. You're going to have to put some points on the board. And now the special teams part is the trickier part because executing long kickoffs is kind of I don't know. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's one of those perfect storm things, but it is. I mean, Taysom Hill had a 42-yard return on the kickoff, but it's been a difficult thing for the Saints this entire season to break one, and they haven't been able to take one to the house, but they've had a couple of long returns, but one of them was provided by a guy who's no longer available this season. That was Rashid Shaheed.
Right.
So, what do you generate that from? Do you generate it from Dante Pettis? Do you generate it from Taysom Hill? Do you generate it from Mims? How do you get that part of it? Because it seems like maybe Pettis might be the answer at punt return. He might be the answer. But we don't necessarily know at kick return. So that one might be the more difficult one of the 3. But the other 2 are correctable and need to be corrected.
It seems like, and Rizzy said this as well, that quarterback Derek Carr is playing some of his best ball right now. I know he went through a little bit of injury as well earlier in the season, but he does seem like he's kind of caught a good rhythm here over the last couple games.
He has protected the ball. And if you go back to, and I want to say, I think it's the last 5 games of last season. I think the Saints were 4-1 or so. And he might have had like 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 1,400 yards or something like that. And it was one of those stretches where if you had just given a person the raw numbers and said, would you take this guy to be your quarterback? Anybody. Or if you told the person, hey, these are Josh Allen's numbers for the last 5 games, or these are Patrick Mahomes' numbers for the last 5 games. And that person would have been like, you know what, that's pretty nice. But when people heard it was Derek Carr, they're like, oh.
Right.
Hey, the numbers are the numbers. And you do what you have to do. And he's done that, starting with the last 5-6 games of last season. He's played at a high level. He's protected the football. Yeah, he's had some spots where, things did not go very well. He did not play very well. He made some bad throws and some bad decisions, but that happens to every quarterback in the NFL. So I think when he says he's playing at the highest level he has in the NFL, I think he is absolutely correct because he's playing efficiently. And if you look at his numbers, I would say probably over the last 12, 15 games, they are probably as good as any quarterbacks in the league in terms of touchdown to interception ratio, which is the only thing that really matters to me. Mm-hmm. The yards is nice. That's great. But it's, do you get in the end zone? Yeah. Do you not turn it over? That's the main thing. And I think he's done a great job of that over the last, 15, 16 games.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, the way they ended the year last year, we could have said the same thing. Carr was playing his best ball. The team in general was. So hopefully that's, I not want to say it's a theme that continues overall because you want to start better, play better throughout the season. But hopefully we can continue it and play our best, football towards the end of the season here and potentially get into the postseason.
Hey, well, I'm with the team on this. You micro, don't macro, just game at a time because you're 4-7. If you're the Saints, you're 4-7. And you don't really, and you're a couple of games behind the Falcons in the division. And so before you can make up that ground, you can't look and say, okay, we're going to beat this team, we're going to beat this team, we're going to beat that. This is the NFL, mm-hmm. and nothing can be taken for granted. I'm sure Atlanta felt like they were on a pretty good sprint, and suddenly they're not. And so these things happen in the NFL. So don't worry about what everybody else is doing. I say that for any team. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Just handle your business and see where the chips fall when you've done what you're supposed to do or what you feel like you're capable of doing.
Yeah. I mean, everybody we talked to today literally, I think, said the same thing. 1-0, just focus on the Rams. Mm-hmm. Sorry, we don't care about the bigger picture. Yeah, even though people are throwing the question out there.
And the Rams smacked this team around last year.
Yeah.
So this is not a team that you look at and say, well, we're going to win the last 6. Well, the first one of those 6 is against the Rams, who smacked this team around last year. And so this is not a team to look over, even though Philly just smacked the Rams around, but there is no carryover correlation. Well, Philly beat them this way, therefore you will beat them. No, there is none of that in the NFL. Now that I think about it, there's none of that in college football now. Mm-hmm. So you got to go out and do the work. You can't just say, well, they beat them this way, so we're going to beat them this way. Well,
Saquon Barkley, though, he had 255 rushing yards. 255 rushing yards.
And he busted a 70-yarder, and he busted a 72-yarder. Now, when last have the Saints had a guy who ran for 255 yards?
I mean, Taysom put up a lot of yards last game.
When last have they had a guy who ran for 255? See, so you can't just say, well, they gave up 255 and Taysom ran for 180 or whatever it was, so therefore he's going to run for another. It just doesn't happen that way. I wish it did.
But there are opportunities for it to happen.
Well, I mean, you look at it and schematically you say, well, there's some things happening here. But you also have to figure the Rams look at themselves and say, you know what, this is where we gave it up.
Yeah. So
we're going to shore that up. This is where Taysom Hill just beat the brains out of the last team, mm-hmm. so we're not going to allow Taysom Hill to do that, and we're not going to allow Alvin Kamara to do that. And they've got one receiver that we're probably a little bit afraid of in MVS, mm-hmm. so maybe we can see what we can do with that, and then we'll take our chances. So, the Rams look at the film too. They know where the weaknesses are, and the same thing we can say for the Saints. The Saints are hemorrhaging chunk plays.
Yeah.
Hemorrhaging them. And it doesn't matter who they're playing. They're giving up chunk plays left and right. And so now it's, okay, how do they stop that? Because the Rams are looking at the Saints saying, okay, we can get some plays off of them too. Mm-hmm. They gave, Jameis Winston almost had, 400 yards passing. So why can't we?
Yeah.
And we probably have a better receiving core than Jameis Winston had. So, it's one of those things where both teams are kind of probably looking at the other one, licking the chops a little bit, saying, you know what, we can get one here.
Yeah, and the Rams are 5-6 on the season, and they have players like Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Kyron Williams is somebody that came up today as well. And those guys combined haven't really done a lot. I think they've only scored 2 touchdowns.
Haven't done a lot, but those guys, Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua, had a field day on the Saints last year.
Yeah.
And the Saints are missing their 2 starting corners. And so now you have to rely on Alontae Taylor and hopefully Kool-Aid McKinstry to step up and play bigger and better than they did against Cleveland. And again, a lot of this, I'm talking yards now, and where I really should be where I really should be like facing the scoreboard. That's the emphasis, because you give up 14 points one week and you give up 17 points another week, hey, I'll take that. I'll take that. So if the Rams come in here and get 600 yards, but they get 17 points, I'm going to take that. I'll live with that because I hope that the Saints can get 20.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those where there's some things that you're willing to live with if the end result is keeping them off the scoreboard. And the Saints have been really fortunate that way with a ton of missed field goals the last couple of games.
Yeah.
But still, you've been able to keep them off the scoreboard because you have forced them to have to attempt those field goals. So hopefully that's something that they can continue where, you might give up some yards, but tighten up when you got to tighten up. And if they have to kick 3 field goals, that's 9 points. If you can get a field goal and a touchdown, that's 10. You win.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations.
Yeah. We talked to Cam Jordan today, and he's somebody that's been playing a little bit more last 2 weeks, and the defensive line seems like they've really clicked. Going up against Matt Stafford, he got sacked 5 times last week and had 11 quarterback hits. So their line right now, they're down a couple people. They've been struggling. Do you think that the Saints' defensive line can have a field day in this one?
I hope so. Now, of course, if you're the Rams, you're gonna hopefully mitigate that. You're gonna probably keep a little bit of help for your offensive line because they haven't done well, and the Saints' defensive line has done well the last couple of games. But the biggest thing is they haven't had to blitz as much because the line has been doing the job, and that's going to be the critical thing against the Rams, especially with those receivers. You got to be able to handle it up front with just the front, and this isn't a young Matthew Stafford. He's not a guy who's going to scramble around and hopefully not going to bust out a couple of 12, 15-yard runs on you. He's pretty much going to be in the pocket. Philly was able to abuse them up front, but Philly abused the Saints up front also. So Philly's got a pretty good front. But the Saints have a pretty good front too, and they have a front that's, these things factor in. The Saints front is fresh. It's coming off a bye week. Philly played a Sunday night game. The Rams played a Sunday night game and have to travel cross country. Those things mean a little something body-wise. Yeah. So you hope that those things will add up in the Saints' favor. But the Saints' defensive line really has played well the last couple of games. They have the sack numbers to show for it and the pressures to show for it. The yardage, you live with that because you're getting the result you want on the scoreboard. When the scoreboard says different, then it's, not a panic, but it's a lot more concern.
You mentioned a little while ago about not having your top 2 corners. Alontae Taylor is back outside. Kool-Aid McKinstry back last game. And Rizzi said that he thought that Alontae Taylor got a little too much flack for 2 games ago and how poorly it appeared that he played in that one. Overall, he's had a very, very good year. I know he's somebody that's going to bounce back. Kool-Aid continues to get used to playing in the NFL and his role and more minutes and everything like that. You feel pretty confident in what those 2 can do?
Yeah. Cornerbacks like playing offensive tackle. You can play a guy and you can play a man-to-man and you can have 35, 40 snaps against him. And for 37 of those snaps, you can, they won't throw his way, or you can have 3 pass breakups. But the 2 he catches, if he catches 2, and those 2 are for 75 yards and one of them for a touchdown, it looks awful all of a sudden because it's like he gave up big plays. Well, yeah, he did on a couple of occasions, but for the overwhelmingly, he had a really nice day. And I think it's one of those things with cornerbacks, you always see the big play against them, and you don't pay a lot of attention to the run support. You don't pay a lot of attention to the pass breakups. And those are the things that, when you look at the film, the coaches look at it and say, well, you know what, it wasn't quite as bad as people are making it out to be. And that's what you have to hang on to as a player, too. The player has to have a really, really short memory, and he's got to bounce back quickly. And he's got to say, you know what, man, I felt pretty bad after that game, but now that I look at the film, I was in good position on a lot of these plays. I got a chance to get my hands on the ball. Maybe I need to come up with a pick on that one. But, overall, it wasn't quite as bad as it looks. And a couple of those were some big league throws over Alontae, like NFL throws where it was like there are very few people who can make that pass and not have it picked or not have it batted down. And that was a perfect pass against that coverage. And that happens in the NFL.
Yeah. And I said minutes because obviously I'm basketball mind right now instead of more snaps. I'm like, more minutes. And I was like, that does not sound right. But The other thing that like continually came up with Derek Carr was, and has over the past couple weeks because of his production, is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. And I know you talked to him a little bit in the locker room today. Just how much of an impact has he had on what this offense is able to do and the outlook going forward? Because we saw Chris Olave today, but he was just on the field, practice field, in street clothes, being there hanging around the team. But he is still going through his concussion process and seeing a specialist, still trying to figure out what's the best move for him. We're not going to see him this week.
No.
So, I mean, it's MVS and then, various other players, and tight ends were a huge aspect of the offense in this past game.
He is the known commodity. He's had production in the NFL before. He hadn't had production, like at this level in I think back-to-back weeks. I'd have to go back and look, but he has had production in the NFL, and that's huge that the Saints were able to get him. I don't know why the guy was on the street, to be honest with you. Thank goodness for the Saints that he was. A big guy who can run, and they had two guys who could run, Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. Mm-hmm. And then those two guys go out, and, Mason Tipton can run, but, he's not a proven commodity, and then he was having difficulty getting open and getting deep. And then where are your other commodities? And MVS comes in, and immediately, besides the Carolina game, he had the one catch for 5 yards, and then he explodes the next time he's on the field. And now you're like, okay, this is a guy who knows how to get deep, can get open, can run past people who know he can run fast, mm-hmm. and still be able to make the deep play. So you have that on your offense, and now suddenly the Saints went, 4 or 5 weeks it felt like, where the offense was very constricted because defenses didn't fear anybody getting behind them. Well, now you got a dude who, hey, he can get behind you. So you better account for that. And most of the time when you account for that, it's got to be two guys. Somebody's got to play deep, and somebody's got to play him underneath. And he's capable of running past the deep guy. So that occupies and loosens up the defense. And so now you can get, Juwan Johnson, or you can get, Foster Moreau, or, you can get maybe Alvin Kamara loose, or you can get Taysom Hill and those kinds of things. So those things matter a lot. But, man, he has been, I don't want to say a godsend. I hate to say something like that. But he has been a great remedy for the Saints offense because they needed somebody who could get deep, and they didn't have somebody who could get deep. And now they got a guy who's, in some seasons has averaged 16, 17 yards a catch. I mean, so this dude can do it. It might not be, 85 catches a year, but if it's 40 catches and he's averaging 17, 18 yards, people know that. They see that, and they say, okay, they might not throw it to 10 a lot, but when they do, 10 can run, so we got to account for him.
Yeah, and he's picked up a ton of yards in 3 or 4 catches a game here and has been a big threat that people definitely have to worry about. Taysom Hill, obviously, can't say enough about his last game and everything that he did. And Rizzy today said that he wants to continue to use him in various ways. He said, I don't want him to do a lot of one thing. I want him to do a little bit of a lot of different things. So basically they're going to throw him all over the field. And it got brought up, like, can he sustain that?
Well, history has not been kind to Taysom, unfortunately. He's been a guy who's gotten injured. He takes a lot of punishment because, one reason he takes punishment is because Taysom doesn't evade anybody. He runs over people.
Yeah.
And so when you run over people, you're going to issue punishment, but you're also going to absorb punishment. And so he takes a lot of punishment by his playing style. So you have to be careful about, how do you utilize him and how many touches. I think he had 7 rushes from the last game, and he ends up with the 3 touchdowns. But you got to be really careful about, is he a guy who could have 16 carries in a game? I don't know. Is he a guy who, now he's had 8 catches in a game, but that's better because that's open space. Mm-hmm. But can he carry it 16, 17 times? He might be able to do it for a game. I don't know if he could sustain it for 3 or 4 games. Mm-hmm. And again, he's been a guy who has had injuries, and when he's injured and out, you can see it in the Saints offense. It is affected tremendously when he's not on the field because even the Saints defenders say in practice, some of them say, I hate to see when Taysom's out there on offense because we don't know what he's going to do. And opposing teams have to feel the same way.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing that guy out there. Only time you know what he's going to do is when he lines up at quarterback, because he's going to run the quarterback power probably. If it's 3rd and 2, he's going to run it. So you do know that. But for the most part, he's one of those guys who gives you a lot of trouble. But, you got to be available. And so there's a fine line between how many touches he had. So last game he had the 7 rushes, he had 8 catches, he had the kickoff return. So that's, 16 touches? Mm-hmm. And one of them was special teams. And that's probably a good mix for him. But then again, you might get in a game where you really need him. If Alvin Kamara is a little banged up, you might really need him to carry it 15 times. It's just one of those things. So, we'll find out, because Taysom, like I said, he does take a lot of punishment. I mean, he distributes a lot and he takes a lot. Even on the 75-yard touchdown run, he breaks through and he ain't evading anybody.
No.
I mean, they just, Cleveland just didn't want to tackle anymore. They'd had enough of him, but he ain't evading anybody. He's going, and if you can catch him, fine. If you're in front of him, he's going to run over you, but he is not running for the sideline saying, I'm going to preserve anything. It's almost like he's saying, you know what? I got a late start in my NFL career, and I'm going to make every possible usage out of it. I'm going to get every yard I can get when I'm out there, and that's the way he plays. I don't care who's in front of him. He's looking to run over somebody. He's not looking to juke anybody. He's gonna hurt somebody.
No, he wants all of it, all of the smoke. And Rizzy said that he is the smartest football player that he's ever come across, which is insane. But he is in so many different rooms and has to know so many different things per each game. It's crazy. A couple players, though, the injury report officially will not come out until tomorrow, that did not practice today was center Eric McCoy and guard Lucas Patrick. McCoy having that injury, groin injury again. Don't know the severity of it. Late in the last game that we had before the bye, Rizzy said he is day to day. It hurts my heart to think of him not playing because of how rough it was when he was not in.
When Eric McCoy didn't play, look, folks you can attribute it to several injuries on the offensive line, but when he didn't play, things kind of fell apart offensively. It was really hard for this team to move the ball, and the quarterbacks were pressured a lot. In these last couple of games, he's been back, and that pressure has minimized, and there's been a lot of production, at least in the first half. But not having him is huge for this team. I mean, Eric, to me, and I don't vote on these things. I don't get a vote, but in my eyes, Eric is not a Pro Bowl center. I think Eric's an All-Pro center. I think he's that caliber of player, and when he's missing, it is glaring. It is noticeable. I mean, when he went out against Philly in that game, and that was the 3rd game of the season, it was like, oh my goodness, the team couldn't move the ball at all, and Philly lived in the backfield. Yeah. And so that's one of those things where hopefully he can get back as soon as possible. No shade to Shane Lemieux, but there's a reason Eric McCoy is Eric McCoy. He is a phenomenal player, and when he doesn't practice on a Tuesday and the game's on Sunday, and Tuesday is actually Wednesday, and now we're going to come back and Wednesday's going to be Thursday. He'll have a couple of more days to rest it, but it's one of those things when he went out of the game, against Cleveland, and I think he made it to halftime, but once he went in and it probably got stiff on him, and then it's like, let's hope this isn't anything close to what it was. And obviously it didn't, because the first groin injury required surgery.
Right.
But hopefully this is something he can bounce back from quickly. But it's something that you don't want him to bounce back from too quickly, because you don't want to re-aggravate it again and again and again, and it lasts the rest of the season. So you got to get it right. But, man, I sure hope it's right by Sunday.
I mean, he did have this last week off, and hopefully he was in here getting some stuff done on it, and we'll see how the rest of the weeks transpires. Running back Jamal Williams was back on the field, and defensive end Tano Passigno's 21-day practice window is opened. He was on the field. Man, he had that Achilles injury in the offseason and has worked his behind off to get back on this field, and this is much earlier, I think, than anybody expected.
Yeah, they thought he might get back at some point this season, and man, it is phenomenal that he has a 21-day practice window open, and hopefully he can get back out there, because I remember, just going back to last year, he is a versatile defensive lineman who can play end or tackle in those packages, and he gives you something, especially he was really good at defensive tackle last year. And so he gives you something in terms of rushing and, another really productive player or solid player at worst in that defensive line rotation. So that's something that's going to be helpful to the Saints as they go along when and if they can get him back on the field.
Yeah. All right, JD, I appreciate the time. I am glad that you were productive in your bye week and your wife's happy, and I'm sure she's enjoying her rock garden.
Yeah. I think she likes it. I mean, well, hey, I told her, hey, as long as you like it, I'm cool with it. But, the rocks are down now, and they are not coming up anytime soon. So let's hope she does like them, because we ain't changing in a while, because that's work.
Yeah. Derek Carr said his wife was ready for him to leave the house as well. I'm sure he's probably just walking around bored.
Yeah, I mean, now he's kind of anal about, football, so she probably was ready for him to get out of the house, even though, every time he's out of the house, he says he misses his kids so much, but, she probably was ready to get him out of the house, because he seems like the type that's like, just anal about everything around the house. Everything's got to be just so. And so, if that's the case, and the wife's there and she's dealing with the kids all the time, or he might be the guy who's, he might be the fun parent, like, I can see Cam's wife, Nikki, wanting him to get out of the house because he's like having an extra kid in the house. And so you get him in the house and you tell the kids one thing to be the disciplinarian, and Cam says, hey, let's go get this candy. He's that kind of dude. So I would definitely see her wanting to get him out of the house. I'm not exactly sure how Derek is, if he's that kind of parent or not. But he strikes me as the type that, after a while, you probably do want him to get out of the house. Yeah.
Well, shout out to Cam and Nikki, because they were out in the community today giving out turkeys and doing their Thanksgiving drive.
Yeah, so Nikki, our newest model.
Yeah, she did. The Queen of Sparkle model. I know a lot of people have been getting that gear. So it is still available. You can always go to the NewOrleansSaints.com site and check it out. But that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another podcast as we dive into the Rams and what their seasons looked like and what we can expect from them on Sunday. So yes, JD, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.